Hello everyone, this is Genuine Polish, and in this video we are going to be taking a look at how to build a windmill from the Create mod in Minecraft. This is one of the better stress unit generators because it's so simple to build, it doesn't cost very much, and it generates a pretty significant amount of stress units. In fact, it might be as much stress units as you'll ever need in the entire Create mod. So let's take a look at it. This is just one that I built in a nice little structure to kind of make it blend in with a nice background. But you can just throw these things up anywhere, or you can bury them in the bottom of the earth in the deepest, darkest depths. It doesn't matter. So with any contraption in the Create mod, you should probably have the basic tools. I recommend using a pair of engineer goggles when dealing with any kind of stress units, and a wrench is always useful for changing the position of blocks or changing the direction that the windmill spins. You can be sure that you have the right goggles and the right wrench because it'll say Create underneath. Alright, and with that, let's get crafting. On screen is a list of everything that you're going to need. Ultimately, all you need is a windmill bearing and some sails or wool and super glue, so that way you can get your windmill up and running. But of course, you're going to want to have shafts and cogwheels or mechanical belts, so that way you can actually connect it to your machines and it's not just spinning doing nothing. So let's collect all of our ingredients. So first off, we're going to build our windmill bearing. It's very simple. It's just one shaft, one stone, and one oak slab, and that'll get you a windmill bearing. And you can already see what its max stress unit is, 8,192. So how do we get that? Well, it's very simple. So place your windmill bearing, and then from there you can either use wool to connect it. It takes a minimum of 8 blocks to initially start it going. So we have 8 blocks of wool. And now if you're using wool, you're gonna have to use super glue to connect all the wool together, so that way they will all rotate together. Now with an empty hand, right click on the windmill bearing and it'll start to rotate. Well, you can see we're generating 512 stress units here, and it's rotating quite slowly. You can click it again, you can see it has a button built in on top, and that'll disable it. Alternatively, you could build yourself some sails. The downside with sails is that they're quite expensive to build in contrast to just using wool. They do look quite a bit nicer. And a huge benefit is that they automatically glue themselves together. So if slime is difficult for you to get on your world at the moment, sails might be better because they'll automatically glue themselves together and you don't have to waste super glue. Not that it takes a lot of super glue to glue wool. One super glue used will glue 25 wool together, and our maximum windmill size is 128 sails. A cool thing to note is if you're going for a particular looking design, you can actually use the sail frames and build a windmill just as you would with a sail. It's really simple. All you have to do is put the sails in the crafting menu and it will remove the sail. And see, it generates just as many stress units. But how do we get that number of stress units? Well, now we have to get into building a proper windmill. So I've placed a windmill bearing a little bit off the ground to give us some space. Now we can expand and make something that looks a little bit more like a proper windmill. As you can see here, we have 9 blocks, and the minimum to get the windmill started is 8. And we're generating 512 stress units. Well, I'll tell you the secret. Every 7 blocks will get you to the next level of stress units. So as you can see, as we increase the number of sails or wool blocks, we'll generate more and more progressive stress units. Right now we're at 2,560, which is a pretty significant amount. That's more than you're going to get out of a handful of water wheels. And it doesn't take up that large of a footprint. The biggest issue with windmills, in my opinion, is there's a lot of moving parts. You can kind of solve this by not having them be generating on your screen constantly. You may want to consider burying them or upgrading to a steam engine, so that way you can have less moving parts and less starting on your server. So if you want to increase the number of sails that you have on your windmill, you can just right click on it and then add sails and start it again. Now, a good way to connect the windmill to contraptions on the ground is by placing a shaft on the back of the windmill and then placing another shaft on the ground and using a mechanical belt to connect it to the lower shaft. This is a nice simple way to really quickly transfer that rotational force to the ground level. Mechanical belts do go a pretty good distance. I believe it's 25 or 32 blocks. I don't exactly remember. But considering just how far you can get with a single mechanical belt and how much cheaper they are than shafts or cogwheels, I would absolutely recommend using this to transfer your force to the ground. And of course, naturally, when I'm filming, a trader has to come up. I hate these guys. Not the prettiest thing, but if you want to fit the maximum number of sails on a single windmill, which is 128 tiles, you're probably going to have to end up sacrificing looks. I'll show you some ways to kind of compact the design. Any way you slice it though, they end up being really big, so just keep that in mind. Here we have 2 maximum size windmills. You can see that the designs are pretty bulky and they're not too appealing on the eye. On the left we have 11 by 11 square with 7 leftover blocks to give us a total of 128. It's not very pretty looking, but if you tried to make these look like actual windmill sails, you would have this giant contraption that would probably look a little bit worse than just having this machine. You can build windmills horizontally if you prefer that. It does help burying them, or you could build a 3-dimensional shape like this. Because these cells are all making contact with the adjacent cells, you might as well just use wool for this one and use the super glue. It's actually going to reduce the amount of CPU usage because there's going to be hidden blocks, and it might look a little bit prettier than this crazy contraption that I put together. Now, if you want a windmill that is buried underground and as out of the way as possible, I do have a solution for you, but your friends are probably going to hate it when they find it. I give you the wool log. It's not deceptive. It's a bunch of wool glued together. In fact, it's 128 wool to be exact. This seems to cause the least amount of stuttering out of any of the windmill designs, so I do think the cells, for whatever reason, do cause a little bit more stuttering than just using wool blocks. And the nice thing about this is you could have this thing aimed straight down at the bottom of the earth, and no one would ever know it was there. Now, if you put it in the overworld like I did, your friends are probably going to come into your base and destroy it because it looks terrible. So I recommend building this underground, buried it, or use a combination. If you need to get it far away from your base, build it out 100 tiles or something, then use a block that's 20 tiles big, just to minimize the amount of space that you are using in one direction. But you can see here we're generating the maximum stress units of 8,192. These are all three designs to help you maximize your windmill stress units and minimize its footprint. We have the one on the left that is good to use if you want to just completely bury it. We have the one in the middle, which is probably going to be the most practical one if you're going to have it above ground, or you could use this to build it horizontally and have a bunch layered on top of each other that are going down in the ground. Or you could have this one here and build it out of wool blocks to help kind of minimize its footprint and keep it on the overworld. They're all kind of an eyesore, so I would recommend building proper windmills like this one. Before we log off, I just wanted to talk about not so much windmills, but wind-powered machines. You can see here we have andesite casings with a wool sail, a windmill bearing, and then mechanical plows. Now, if we right-click on the windmill, the sail will rotate the machine, plowing our fields. And of course, if you use a wrench like I mentioned before, you can see it says rotation direction counterclockwise. All you have to do if you want to change the direction is scroll. I don't think the plows work in reverse, but for the other windmills, it might be useful. And if you have any other wind-powered machines, it's very useful. And there you have it. That is how you build windmills. They're actually really simple and they generate a lot of stress units. Trying to maximize a single windmill to 128 tiles is a little unpractical, but you can do it. And I recommend maybe burying it if you're going to have some ridiculous contraptions. I mean, you can see that freaking wool log over there in the distance rotating and it looks terrible. Don't do it. Your friends are going to hate you for it. But that's it. Alright everybody, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. There's going to be more Minecraft Create mods rolling out. Hopefully I just have a little bit more time. If you want to support the channel, please like, comment, and subscribe. Everything helps, and I'll see you next time.